Welcome to the News Hour. Millions of people across Europe are set to mark Easter Sunday under new coronavirus restrictions. The EU's largely slow vaccination rollout and rising infections are leaving governments with just one option: a full lockdown. Many people in Paris left the capital ahead of restrictions as France faces its third nationwide lockdown. On Friday, it reported its biggest jump in the number of intensive care patients. Italy is enforcing a strict 3-day lockdown during the Easter weekend. Non-essential travel has been banned, but churches are open and people are allowed to share an Easter meal at home with 2 other adults. And in a rare national plea, Germany's president has urged Germans to get vaccinated as more cities increase coronavirus measures. Nadim Baba is joining us from London to talk us through developments in Europe. And you have 2 very different lockdown situations in France and the UK. Nadim, can you tell us more about those?
Absolutely, Doreen. Well, you were just briefly talking about Italy there, which is really trying to get on top of another wave of coronavirus infections. On Friday, it reported 22,000 new cases, slightly down on the day before, but still worryingly high. So the country now is in a red zone emergency, as they call it. It's not as strict as it was last spring when people were told you may not leave the house for non-essential reasons, but they're being told that they can't travel outside their hometown or their home region, although they can actually go in groups of up to 2 to other households over the Easter holiday. The controversial thing for a lot of people is that people can leave Italy for non-essential journeys abroad, like going on holiday. So there have been busy scenes at different airports in Italy, which have angered some Italians when they're being told that they can't travel to meet family members in other regions for Easter. The situation in Britain is somewhat different because of the vaccine rollout, because of the speed of that vaccine rollout in the UK that you were referring to. The message here is that under the relaxations of the restrictions, people can now gather in groups of up to 6 outdoors. Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Friday reminding people that the risk of transmission is higher indoors and urging them to stick to the guidelines, which is only meet outdoors or in other people's gardens, and just use common sense. Keep that distance between yourselves. And he's hoping that people will stay local, although there is no legal restriction on people actually travelling to beach resorts, for example, which has led to some people, for example, in southwest England, getting worried about an influx of people from elsewhere in the country.
Right, and that's a very different situation from France, where now it's reporting a third, or people there are facing a third nationwide lockdown.
That's right. In France, another country which is traditionally, which has a large Catholic population, which will be inconvenienced by the restrictions, but the government says that it's doing what it needs to do to drive down transmission. Now, they reported in France more than 45,000 new cases on Friday, so even higher. The restrictions which have been in place in some regions, including Paris, will now apply nationwide from 7 p.m. local time on Saturday. There's a curfew. There are restrictions on people's movements, saying that they can't go more than 10 kilometers from where they live for non-essential journeys. The government has been saying that there will be some tolerance over the next few days through to Monday, which is our public holiday for people going further for Easter. But after that, the police will actually be checking that people have an attestation, a document saying that they need to go somewhere for a particular reason, for an essential journey, such as healthcare, for example. The situation in France has been worrying a lot of healthcare officials. They really do worry about the number of coronavirus patients still in the hospitals there. And similarly in Spain, one of the hardest hit countries, and a country where many people would have been traveling between regions for Easter, for family gatherings, but also for those famous parades. They're being told that they can't travel between regions. The situation there just not good enough for the government to allow that. Controversially, though, there are people from other EU countries are being allowed to travel into Spain if they've tested negative for COVID-19. That's getting a lot of people in Spain wondering whether the rules really are that sensible.
Okay, Nadeem, thank you so much for that update from London. Let's talk about all of this with John Ryan, who's a visiting fellow at the London School of Economics and Political Science. He's joining us from London as well. Thanks very much for your time with us, Mr. Ryan. So if you look at the economic impact of all of this, I mean, traditionally, the Easter weekend would be peak season for Italy's tourism income, and obviously one of the busiest holiday seasons in Europe. So what impact is this lockdown going to have on the country, economically speaking?
Obviously, it's going to affect the gross domestic product, growth rates, productivity, because not only service industries will be affected, but also factories, etc. Supply chains will be disrupted. So that all will have a negative economic impact, especially when it's countries like Spain, France, Belgium, Germany, Austria, all interconnected with each other. So this will have a detrimental effect because basically the economic impact for France and Germany as opposed to the United Kingdom was less up until now, but there's maybe a catch-up in that economic damage with these types of lockdowns and unfortunately the deaths that will come with the high rates of infection.
Right, and even when the governments start to give the green lights, obviously the readjustment phase is going to take many months, perhaps even years. How long do you think, I know it's a pretty broad question here, but how long do you think that it'll take for these countries to start recovering?
Well, Spain and Italy are in a bad place in terms of infection rates already in the last year and death rates, and they're catching up to the British cases and death rates. And that is very bad because Britain was very much a poor performer in this until the vaccine rollout. And Germany, which is and France now are really starting to feel the pain of this. So, as you say, it's a broad question. We have to remember we're going to have the vaccine rollout. We're going to get the vaccines done and dusted, I think, probably in the UK for first and second vaccines, probably by the end of the summer. Europe is behind that. The European Union's behind that. America is going ahead. Israel is one of the best performers. But we've got these new iterations, South African virus, new iterations of COVID-19. So we'll probably need boosters. So we're going to get situations where there are going to be flare-ups of this time and time again over the next year. So it's very difficult to see that we're going to be anywhere out of this situation until maybe 12 months, maybe 18 months down the line, when maybe we are living without COVID-19, but we might have another iteration that is COVID-20 or something like that. So it's very difficult to make a prediction about that, but I would say that we're nowhere near out of this particular predicament at the moment.
So then you're not very optimistic about a travel and tourism sort of recovery in the short term. The industry,
No.
It accounts for more than 10% of global economic growth, and this clearly is one of the worst hit crises.
Yes, and I mean, your correspondent touched on, the situation in some of the European countries where people are being locked down in their countries. For example, in Germany, there's a lockdown taking place, but thousands of Germans are going to Mallorca, and they may be okay when they get there, but maybe this. COVID-19 flares up there, and that's already happened where some of the tourists have already had to be isolated. So allowing people to travel into other countries when they're trying to lock down is probably not a good idea, because this needs to be really, if you're going to do a lockdown, you're really going to have to make sure that you do everything possible to minimize flare-ups of COVID-19, especially when your infection rate is going up. So people are talking about this tourism and they're talking about the economy, but you won't be able to move forward with the economy. Because if we looked 6 months ago or 7 months ago, Germany looked like it was in a good place. Now it's in a very bad place in terms of that. And there's a degree of human error here. The humanity is getting very tired of all these lockdowns, all these restrictions. And consequently, people become complacent. And of course, COVID-19 thrives in that environment. And that's what we're seeing now in the European Union, a thriving of the virus, a slow vaccine rollout, which is very, very poor performance by the European Union in that particular area. So right. I don't see the tourism industry actually coming back really this year at all.
Okay, thank you so much, John Ryan, for speaking to us from London.
Thank you.